Tonight, you'll climb into a mattress that curves to the exact shape of your spine, pull a blanket to your chin, and close your eyes without a single thought about what's underneath you. For most of the time humans have existed, that thought would have been the difference between waking up and not waking up. For roughly 300,000 years, every ancestor you have, every single one, back before language, back before most fire use, slept on the ground, packed earth, bare stone, a scatter of leaves if the night was kind. Nobody had a bed. Not one person, in a species that would eventually build pyramids and space stations, had thought to lift their body off the dirt to sleep. Earlier members of the human family had been doing the exact same thing for 1,000,000 years before your species even showed up. So why did it take so long? What was actually happening down there, night after night, for 3,000 centuries? Part of the answer is sitting in a cave in South Africa, and it's stranger than you'd guess. The oldest bed ever discovered wasn't just a pile of grass. It was medicated. And once you understand why ancient humans avoided real beds for so long, you'll understand something uncomfortable about why you're wide awake at 3 a.m. Tonight, staring at the ceiling with no predator anywhere near you. Sleeping on open ground sounds almost quaint, like camping. It wasn't. The ground crawled. Scorpions, ticks, biting ants, and snakes all treat bare earth as shared bedroom. Cold pulled heat out of a sleeping body all night long, and damp soil did the same job even faster, seeping in from underneath in a way a fire at your feet could never fully fix. A human lying flat on the ground was also lying flat in the sightline of anything that hunted after dark, close enough to smell, close enough to grab. Every ancestor accepted this as the price of existing. For hundreds of thousands of years, there was no alternative on the table. The ground was simply where night happened, the way weather was simply something that happened to you. Then, around 77,000 years ago, someone changed the terms. Picture a rock shelter above a river in what's now KwaZulu-Natal. As the light goes orange, a small group starts building the night's sleeping surface from scratch, the way they do every evening. They cut soft sedges and rushes from along the water and pile them thick enough to lift a sleeping body off the cold stone floor. Then comes the detail that caught archaeologists off guard. On top of that plant bedding, they lay a second, thinner layer, leaves from a tree called Cryptocarya woody. Crush that leaf and it releases a compound insects can't stand. They weren't just building a mattress. They were building a mattress with the bug spray baked in. Not everyone got the memo, apparently. One of them, still stacking tonight's leaf layer, watches the other flop straight onto last week's uncrushed grass pile and immediately start scratching at a fresh line of bites up one arm. No shared language needed for the look that gets exchanged. Someone is in for a very long night, and the other one knows exactly why. Archaeologist Lynn Wadley and her team uncovered this layered bedding at Sibudu Cave and published the discovery in the journal Science in 2011. It remains the oldest known bedding on Earth, 50,000 years older than anything found before it. And here's the part that matters most. This group didn't build it once. Analysis of the site shows they burned the old, pest-ridden layer and rebuilt a fresh one on top, over and over, for thousands of years. Bedding wasn't a lucky one-time discovery. It was already a habit, passed down the way a recipe gets passed down. So beds existed, at least on this stretch of coastline, 77,000 years before your mattress warehouse opened its doors. But a bed and a full night of uninterrupted sleep turn out to be two completely different inventions. Historian Roger Eckert spent years combing through pre-industrial diaries, court records, and medical texts across Europe, and found something almost no modern sleeper has ever experienced: segmented sleep. People didn't sleep in one long block. They slept in two. The fire has burned down to embers. A family lies close around it. And somewhere around midnight, without any alarm or signal, eyes start opening. This isn't insomnia. This is Tuesday. For an hour, maybe two, people talk quietly, tend the coals, mend a tool, check on the animals, or just lie there thinking before drifting back down into what the old records call second sleep. Some couples treat this hour as their real private time together, well-rested and unhurried in a way the end of a long day never allows. Nobody panics about any of it. Nobody reaches for a phone to check the time. Partly because there are no phones yet, but mostly because nobody ever expected the night to be one unbroken block in the first place. Your ancestors had a built-in appointment for doing absolutely nothing in the middle of the night. You get the same wide-awake window at 3 a.m. and call it a problem worth Googling. For much of history, this two-part rhythm, first sleep, a waking hour, second sleep, was simply what a night was. Here's the part that doesn't add up, though. When sleep scientist Jerome Siegel and his team went and studied people who still live without electricity today, hunter-gatherer communities in Tanzania and Namibia, and hunter-horticulturalists in Bolivia, the segmented pattern barely showed up. These groups slept in roughly one continuous stretch, averaging around 6.5 hours a night, and almost never napped during the day. No universal midnight ritual, no two-part sleep wired into the species. Eckertsch's segmented sleep looks like a real, specific historical pattern shaped by long, dark winters and cheap firelight in one particular part of the world, not a hidden default setting buried in every human who ever lived. Which raises the actual question: if ancient bodies weren't built to wake at 3 a.m., as a matter of routine, why do so many modern ones still do exactly that? Anthropologist David Sampson has an answer that has nothing to do with mattresses. Studying sleep among the Hadza of Tanzania, his team fitted dozens of people with activity tracking devices for 20 straight nights. The number that came back should unsettle you a little. Across those 20 nights, the entire group was asleep, at the same time for a grand total of 18 minutes. 18 minutes out of nearly 13,000. At almost every other moment, someone in that camp had their eyes open, not because anyone had insomnia. Because ancient group sleep worked like a rotating watch shift, with different people drifting in and out of light sleep at different hours, so a sleeping group of humans was never, as a whole, fully unconscious. Predators had a much harder time approaching a camp where somebody was always half alert. Sampson's team also found that who stayed lighter and who slept deeper wasn't random. It tracked with age. Older adults woke earlier and slept thinner. Younger adults drifted off later and slept harder. Researchers have started calling this the poorly sleeping grandparent hypothesis. A camp with a mix of ages covers more of the night automatically. No one assigned to guard duty, no one volunteering, just biology quietly staffing the watch. If you've ever had a grandparent up at 5, or a teenager who can't fall asleep before 1 in the morning, that's not a personality clash between generations. That's the same rotation, still running, in a house with no lions anywhere nearby. You don't sleep surrounded by 30 relatives anymore. The watch schedule never got the memo. It's still quietly running, waking parts of you on a shift nobody assigned and nobody currently needs. Ground bedding solved the insect problem. It never solved the ground itself, the cold pulling through it, the damp rising into it, the plain fact that lying flat on the earth put a body within easy reach of anything that crawled, slithered, or bit. That cost kept getting paid, quietly, for tens of thousands more years, long after the leaf-lined mattress had already been invented. The fix, when it finally arrived, wasn't clever. It was obvious, and that's exactly why it took so long. The most obvious ideas are often the last ones anyone questions. In ancient Egypt, by around the 3rd millennium BCE, wooden bed frames start showing up in the archaeological record. Legs, a woven support surface of cord or leather strips, a headrest carved from wood instead of a soft pillow. Lifted even a foot off the floor, a sleeping body was suddenly out of easy reach of scorpions, snakes, rodents, and rising cold, all at the same time. If you compress the entire span of human existence into a single 24-hour day, that first elevated bed doesn't show up until roughly 20 minutes before midnight. Somewhere along the Nile, a craftsman lashes 4 wooden legs onto a rectangular frame and stretches cord across the top in a tight woven grid. That night, for the first time in one household's memory, someone doesn't lie down on the floor. They climb up. The ground, which has spent 300,000 years quietly pulling warmth and comfort off every sleeping human it touched, loses a customer. It doesn't notice. Keeping score was never really its style. Everyone who sees the frame the next morning wants one for themselves, and within a few centuries, the design barely changes at all. The same slanted frame, the same carved headrest, showing up in tomb after tomb for 2,000 years, because once you've solved the ground, you don't mess with success. Not that everyone got one. Wealth decided who slept, elevated. Grand carved beds went into the tombs of nobles and officials, while most ordinary Egyptians kept sleeping on woven mats, on rooftops, on the same packed earth their ancestors always had. Getting off the ground wasn't just a technology. For a very long time, it was a status symbol, the way a mattress with a name and a warranty still is. None of this, the leaves, the segmented nights, the woven frames, was ever really about comfort. Sleep researcher Matthew Walker's work makes the actual stakes clear. Sleep is when the brain clears out metabolic waste, consolidates memory, and resets the systems that keep a body running the next day. Every layer of grass, every insect-repelling leaf, every inch a bed got lifted off cold ground was underneath it all a defense of that process. Comfort was the side effect. Survival was the real project, dressed up as a nap. We spent most of our history engineering better protection for something we couldn't even see happening inside our own skulls, one leaf layer and one wooden leg at a time. And somewhere in that long, slow climb off the ground, we became a species that expected to be safe enough to fully, completely sleep. Not half listening, not rationed into 2 watchful shifts, but actually entirely gone for a few hours, trusting a wall, a lock, or just distance to do the job 300,000 years of biology used to do on its own. Tonight, when you climb into that mattress and pull the blanket to your chin, your body will still run the old program underneath all that comfort, listening for a sound, counting the dark, waiting for something to happen. It doesn't know the watch got called off 10,000 years ago. Nothing is coming. It's going to check anyway.